Hello, today is February 29. This is a leap year that ordinarily February only has 28 days, but since this is a leap year, we have a February 29th. What that means is we have an extra day of Black History Month, and that means I have extra time to do this video. As in this video, I'd like to talk about this man right here in specific. This is Frederick Douglass. And for those who have seen some of my previous videos, you know I'm a strong advocate of youth rights, of young people, children and teenagers, that they should be seen as human beings and treated as such. And so in this video, I like to discuss this man right here, Frederick Douglass, and how his philosophy can be applied to youth rights. Now, I've actually read his book, The Narrative of Frederick Douglass, and I must say that this is one of the best works of literature I've ever read. That this guy, Frederick Douglass, was an amazing writer. And he didn't have a formal education. As a matter of fact, he was not allowed to learn how to read and write. Back in those days, slaves weren't allowed to learn stuff like that, yet he learned it anyway. He was resourceful. Most of it he did himself, since he didn't have a formal education. He did get some help, but most of what he learned about reading and writing, he did himself. So this guy obviously is very smart. This guy's a genius. And he was very determined. The fact that he wasn't allowed by law to learn how to read and write, he didn't let that stop him from becoming, in my opinion, one of the best writers in the world. I mean, he really nails it in this book. Talks about the brutality of slavery and just how harsh and how abusive it was. And he can get quite graphic in this, as a matter of fact, but I definitely recommend this, especially if you're, well, for anybody, but especially for children and teenagers. You could really learn a lot from this man. He really sets an example on how to gain freedom and independence and how to achieve your goals no matter what. Now, I'd like to share some quotes some quotes by Frederick Douglass. I got here one that says, "No man can put a chain about the ankle of his fellow man without at last finding the other end fastened about his neck." That's very true. And I also like to say that that can apply with parents and teenagers. No parent can put a chain about the ankle of his or her teenager without at last finding the other end fastened about his or her neck. I think that's very true. The way sometimes parents or other oppressive authority figures, teachers and whatnot, can try to be really controlling, really restrictive, and might sometimes really try to oppress children and teenagers. Another quote of his, "People might not get all they work for in this world, but they must certainly work for all they get." Something else that should be, young people should be told, that you can't expect to have everything handed to you. If you are lucky enough, you might have some things handed to you, like me, but the fact of the matter is you can't expect everything to be handed to you, and if you really, there's some things that you have to work for no matter what, and which, even if you're handed everything in the world, there's some things that you just won't be able to get, that you'll have to go out and get yourself. And that applies to children and teenagers. Don't expect to be handed your freedom. That's something you have to go out and get and work for and use whatever means. And you have to be resourceful, just like Frederick. And this is one of my favorite quotes of his. He says, right here, he says, "The thing worse than rebellion is the thing that causes rebellion." How true, how very true. The thing that's worse than rebellion is the thing that causes rebellion. Now, Frederick Douglass, he was a rebel, yes, but he was a freedom fighter. Now, freedom fighter, that's a type of rebel. It's a rebel where your cause is freedom. Very good cause. And when you try to take away somebody's freedom, like what they were doing back in those days, using people as slaves, that's worse than, far worse than slaves like Frederick Douglass, who rebelled against it and who became free. As a matter of fact, it justifies rebellion. To take away somebody's freedom, it justifies them to rebel. Rebellion is a good thing in a case like that, like with Frederick Douglass. In that case, rebellion was a good thing. And another quote of his, he says, "I didn't know I was a slave until I found out I couldn't do the things I wanted." That's another thing which young people, which children and teenagers need to realize. A lot of young people, they're programmed in thinking that, oh, you're not 18, you're not 21, therefore you're not supposed to be allowed to do this and that and blah, blah, blah. But when you find out that you can do certain things, that you don't always have to follow rules that say you can't do this or that until you reach a certain age, then you'll realize just how restrictive those age standards are. I mean, I speak from my own experience. There were some things which I did before I was, you could say, allowed to do. And at one time I was thinking, yeah, well, I haven't reached this magical age, so I shouldn't be doing this. But then when I did it, I was like, hey, I don't need to be a certain age to do this. That's so restrictive and it's wrong. Just like a person should not be restricted from being allowed to do certain stuff because of their skin color. Well, they also shouldn't be restricted from being allowed to do certain stuff because of their age. Now, you might say, oh, well, would you expect a young child to be allowed to drive a car or whatever? If they're ready for it, yeah. I mean, yeah, I know that cars are dangerous, and there's lots of dangerous things in this world that not just anybody should be allowed to do. But whether or not you're allowed to do a potentially dangerous thing, that should be when you're ready for it. Not when you're old enough to do it, but when you're ready to do it. So if somebody's ready to drive, then they should be ready. They should drive. Some people might be ready at 15. I've got an uncle who was driving at the age of 15. Some people might be ready when they're 18. Some people might be ready when they're 25. Some people might never be ready. I've got a grown-up aunt who's never had a driver's license. She's scared of it. She gets too nervous, too scared when she's behind the wheel, so she's never gotten a driver's license. Her husband drives her around, or she'll use public transportation, but she's never driven. She's not ready for it. Maybe perhaps never will be. So I just like to clarify that in this video, that you should definitely read this book. This man was a genius. He was a very exceptional individual. You should certainly learn some stuff from the example he sets on how to how to be resourceful. He took risks, which you have to take some risks if you're going to succeed. Take the risk of failure. He took risks. He was a very brave man, very smart, very resourceful, very determined, and he's certainly one of my role models. In some ways, I'd consider him as much a father of this country as George Washington, whereas you could say George Washington gave birth to this country. Frederick Douglass helped this country grow up. So he's definitely a role model of mine, and I'd say he's one of the great American overachievers. And all you young people out there, all you children and teenagers who want to be free from your parents or from other oppressive authority figures, you really need to follow his example. Okay, so that's the video. All right, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.